Admiral Park Min-ho walked into the massive council chamber, his boots echoing against the polished floor. Around him sat representatives from dozens of alien species, each more advanced than humanity. The air felt thick with doubt and barely hidden contempt. He activated the holographic display with steady hands even though his heart was racing. The projection showed Earth's contribution to the war effort. Metal rods, nothing more. Simple iron and steel projectiles that would be fired from electromagnetic launchers. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. The Vrathan delegate, a creature that looked like a giant praying mantis made of dark metal, clicked its mandibles in. What humans had learned was their version of laughter. Its voice buzzed through the translation device. "You bring us sticks? Metal sticks to fight the Korath Empire?" Admiral Park had expected this reaction. The Korath had been steamrolling through the galaxy for 2 years now. Their ships could bend reality itself, making space fold around them. Their weapons existed in multiple dimensions at once. They had technology that most species couldn't even understand, let alone defend against. Commander Lee Hanna from the Proxima Defense Force, humanity's closest allies, looked embarrassed. She had fought alongside human forces before and respected their courage, but even she seemed confused by this presentation. Her blue-scaled face showed concern as she glanced between the hologram and Admiral Park. The beings from Altair Prime were worse. These crystalline creatures communicated through harmonic frequencies, and right now they were practically singing with amusement. Their sounds translated as something like delighted giggling. To them, humanity's weapon looked like something cave dwellers might use, but it was the Nebula Collective that really stung. These gaseous entities didn't have faces, but their swirling patterns made their mockery clear to everyone in the room. They moved in spirals and loops that every species recognized as the universal sign for "this is ridiculous." "Admiral Park," said the council's speaker, trying to maintain diplomatic courtesy, "perhaps you could explain how these projectiles would be effective against Korath quantum shielding?" Park straightened his shoulders. He had prepared for this moment for months, running through every possible question and objection. The mathematics are sound. These projectiles will be launched at 92% the speed of light. More clicking from the Vrathan. Speed means nothing when the enemy can shift between dimensions. Your metal sticks will pass harmlessly through empty space. The Korath reality warping technology has limitations, Park replied calmly. Every quantum field has predictable patterns. Every temporal displacement follows mathematical rules. The crystalline being's harmonics shifted to what sounded like confused discord. They had spent centuries developing weapons that could phase in and out of existence, that could strike from 17 different dimensions simultaneously. The idea that simple kinetic energy could be effective seemed impossible to them. Lee Hanna finally spoke up, her voice gentle but worried. "Admiral, I've seen Korath ships take direct hits from our plasma cannons and not even slow down. They exist partially outside normal spacetime. How can physical projectiles affect them?" Park pulled up another display showing trajectory calculations. The math was complex, but the concept was simple. Physics doesn't care how advanced your technology is. Conservation of energy, momentum, gravity, these are constants throughout the universe. The Korath may have learned to bend some rules, but they cannot break the fundamental laws that govern all matter and energy. The chamber buzzed with translation devices working overtime as delegates discussed among themselves. The general sentiment was clear. Humanity was either brilliant or completely insane, and most were betting on insane. "You're asking us to believe," the Vrathan representative said slowly, "that primitive kinetic weapons can succeed where our most advanced technology has failed?" "I'm asking you to trust in the laws of physics," Park replied. "The first test will be at Titan's Edge, where Admiral Nam Jiwoo will engage the Korath advance fleet." At the mention of Titan's Edge, the chamber grew quieter. Everyone knew about Titan's Edge. 2 full battle fleets had been completely destroyed, there just last month. The Korath had used some kind of temporal weapon that aged the ships to dust in seconds. "If your weapons fail," rumbled a deep voice from the back of the chamber, "Admiral Nam and his crew will die like the others." Park nodded grimly. If they fail, we'll know within 48 hours, but if they succeed? He paused, looking around the room at all the skeptical faces and alien expressions of doubt. If they succeed, we might finally have a way to hurt the Korath Empire. The murmurs grew louder now, a mix of dozens of different languages and communication methods. Some delegates seemed intrigued despite themselves, while others looked like they were already planning humanity's funeral. Admiral Park gathered his materials and prepared to leave. He had said what he came to say. In 2 days, the galaxy would learn whether humanity's ridiculous weapons were the key to victory or just another tragic mistake in a war they were already losing. Captain Kim Ji-ho gripped the armrest of his command chair as explosions lit up the darkness of space around them. The battle for Titan's Edge was going exactly as everyone had predicted, badly for the good guys. 3 Korath warships hung in space like deadly black triangles, each one the size of a small city. They moved with an eerie grace that defied physics, sometimes seeming solid, other times flickering like mirages. Around them, the wreckage of 2 allied fleets drifted in expanding clouds of debris. "Sir, the Centauri battlecruiser just went dark," reported Ensign Park Suman from communications, her voice tight with stress. They had all watched as reality seemed to twist around the massive ship, aging it centuries in seconds until it crumbled to dust. Kim Ji-ho had been fighting in space for 15 years, but he had never seen anything like the Korath weapons. Their temporal disruptors could make time move differently around their targets. Their quantum cannons fired shots that existed in multiple dimensions at once, making them impossible to dodge or block. "Distance to primary target?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Lieutenant Choi Minji looked up from her tactical console, sweat beading on her forehead. 12 million kilometers and closing, sir. The lead Korath ship is designated as the command vessel. Through the main view screen, Kim could see the enemy flagship. It was beautiful in a terrifying way, its hull shifting between different states of matter. Sometimes it looked solid black, other times it seemed to be made of liquid shadow, and occasionally it appeared to be nothing but organized energy. On that ship, Admiral Vexthon was reviewing the battlefield with satisfaction. The humans had finally arrived, just as his intelligence reports had predicted. One small ship, primitive by galactic standards, approaching at what their species probably considered attack speed. His tactical officer, a being that looked like a cross between a jellyfish and a computer, floated beside his command throne. The human vessel shows standard electromagnetic signatures. No quantum enhancement detected. Shall we destroy it immediately? Vexthon's multiple eyes focused on the display showing the approaching human ship. It looked like something from a museum. Simple metal construction, chemical rockets, and what appeared to be magnetic accelerators along its hull. "Let them come closer. I want to see what the famous human desperation looks like." Back on the Resilience, Kim Ji-ho was running. Through final checks with his crew, they had trained for this moment for months, but training was different from reality. Out here, with Korath weapons that could unmake matter itself, there would be no second chances. "Weapon systems online," reported Chief Weapons Officer Lieutenant Kim Dae-ho. "All railguns charged and ready. Projectile bay reports full load. 60 iron rods, each one precisely machined to specifications. Targeting solution locked," added Choi Minji. "Computer has calculated the firing sequence based on predicted Korath movement patterns." Kim Ji-ho took a deep breath. Earth's greatest minds had spent 2 years developing this weapon system. Not because they wanted to, but because they had to. Humanity didn't have the luxury of fighting fair against enemies who could manipulate reality itself. "Sir," came a nervous voice from the sensor station. "I'm reading massive energy buildup from the Korath ships. They're preparing to fire." Through the view screen, they could see space itself beginning to warp around the enemy vessels. Colors that shouldn't exist began to appear, and the stars behind the Korath ships started to stretch and bend. "Fire all weapons," Kim Ji-ho ordered. The Resilience shuddered as its electromagnetic railguns activated in sequence. 60 metal rods, each weighing several tons, launched from the ship's weapon bays in rapid succession. To anyone watching, they looked disappointingly ordinary, just long pieces of iron and steel flying through space. On the Korath flagship, Admiral Vexthan's crew detected the launch immediately. "Kinetic projectiles inbound," reported the tactical officer with something that might have been amusement. "Impact in 47 seconds at current velocity." "Velocity?" Vexathan asked, more curious than concerned. 92% light speed, Admiral." For the first time, Vexthan felt a flicker of interest. That was faster than he had expected from primitive human technology. Still, his ships could phase out of normal space-time. Physical projectiles would simply pass through them harmlessly. "Activate. Phase shifting," he commanded. "Let's show them how useless their toys are." But as the Korath ships began to shift between dimensions, something unexpected happened. The approaching projectiles began to change course slightly, adjusting their paths with tiny thruster burns. They weren't just flying in straight lines, they were actively tracking their targets. "Admiral," the tactical officer's voice carried a note of confusion. "The projectiles are compensating for our phase variance. They're predicting our dimensional shifts." Vexthan's confidence wavered for the first time in the battle. How is that possible? The answer was something the Korath Empire had forgotten in their pursuit of advanced technology. Mathematics didn't lie. Physics didn't care about dimensional phases or quantum states. And the humans had spent 2 years calculating exactly where the Korath ships would be, regardless of how many dimensions they tried to hide in. The first iron rod was now 30 seconds away, and it was aimed with deadly precision at a point in space that existed across all possible dimensional phases, simultaneously. Lieutenant Commander Yang Seohyun's fingers flew across her console as streams of data flooded her screens. The Korath ships were moving in ways that seemed impossible, flickering in and out of existence, appearing hundreds of kilometers away from where they had been microseconds before. "Captain, I'm tracking their movement patterns," she called out, her voice filled with excitement rather than fear. "The temporal displacement isn't random, it's following quantum probability curves." Captain Kim Ji-ho turned from the main screen where the first iron rod was streaking toward the enemy fleet. "Explain it in simple terms, Yang." "Think of it like this, sir," Yang replied, pulling up a holographic display that showed the Korath ships as glowing dots jumping around a 3-dimensional grid. They think they're moving unpredictably, but they're actually following the laws of quantum mechanics. Every jump has to happen within certain mathematical boundaries. The bridge crew watched in tense silence as the first rod approached the lead Korath ship. At the last second, the enemy vessel shifted through time, appearing several kilometers away from where it had been. The iron projectile seemed to miss completely, flying past empty space. Admiral Vexthan allowed himself a moment of satisfaction aboard his flagship. "As expected," he rumbled to his crew. "Primitive kinetic weapons cannot touch us when we exist outside their linear time stream." But Yang Seohyun was smiling as she watched her instruments. "Rod 1 is performing exactly as calculated," she announced. "Impact with temporal shadow in 3, 2, 1. The iron rod struck something invisible in the space where the Korath ship had been 4 seconds earlier. There was no explosion, no flash of light, just a sudden ripple in space-time itself. The effects were immediate and devastating. "What just happened?" demanded Kim Ji-ho. "Every time the Korath ships jump through time, they leave traces of themselves behind," Yang explained rapidly. "Quantum echoes, temporal shadows. Call them whatever you want. Those shadows are still connected to the ships through quantum entanglement. When our rod hit the shadow, it created a feedback loop. On the Korath flagship, alarms began blaring as their temporal displacement system started malfunctioning. The ship flickered rapidly between different time states, unable to maintain stable positioning. "Science Officer report," Admiral Vexthan commanded. "Unknown, Admiral. The quantum field around our ship is destabilizing. Something has interfered with our temporal matrix at a fundamental level." The second iron rod was approaching now, and this time, Admiral Vexthan watched it with growing concern. His tactical displays showed the projectile's trajectory, and it appeared to be heading for completely empty space, nowhere near any of his ships. "That human weapon will miss by thousands of kilometers," his tactical officer reported. "It poses no threat." But Yang Seohyun knew better. She had spent months studying Korath technology, learning how their quantum generators worked. Rod 2 will reach target coordinates in 2.7 seconds, she announced. Right where their power core will be. Will be? Asked Kim Ji-ho. It's not there now. No, sir, but it will be. Their quantum generator has to cycle through specific dimensional phases to maintain power. In exactly 2.7 seconds, it has to manifest in normal space-time to discharge excess energy. It's not a choice. It's a requirement of their technology. Admiral. Vexthun's science officer suddenly straightened with alarm. Admiral, our quantum generator is approaching mandatory discharge cycle. We must drop to normal space in approximately 3 seconds. The Admiral's multiple eyes widened as he realized what was happening. The humans hadn't just fired randomly. They had calculated the exact moments when Korath technology would be vulnerable. The second iron rod reached its target coordinates, just as the Korath flagship's generator materialized in normal space. The impact sent shockwaves through the ship's entire power grid, causing systems to overload throughout the vessel. Impossible, whispered the science officer. They predicted our quantum cycles with perfect accuracy, but it was the third rod that truly demonstrated the terrifying precision of human calculations. Yang Seo-hyun watched as her instruments tracked its approach, her excitement building. This is the big one, Captain, she said. Rod 3 isn't aimed at where the ship is, or where it will be. It's aimed at where the ship has to be, according to the fundamental laws of physics. Admiral Vexthun tried desperately to move his flagship, engaging every evasive system at his disposal. The ship phased through dimensions, jumped backward and forward in time, even attempted to exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously. Nothing worked. The humans have calculated the intersection point of all possible quantum states, Yang explained to her captain. No matter how the Korath ship moves through space or time, there's one point where all probability lines converge. One spot where the ship's quantum core must exist in order to maintain coherence across dimensions. The third iron rod punched through space-time itself, striking the Korath flagship at the exact coordinates where its quantum field equations demanded the ship's core must be located. The impact bypassed all shields, all armor, all dimensional defenses, because it struck at the mathematical foundation that made those defenses possible. Admiral Vexthun watched in stunned silence as his most advanced technology was neutralized by simple iron rods guided by nothing more sophisticated than mathematical precision. How? He whispered. The answer was written in the fundamental constants of the universe. Numbers that remained true, regardless of how advanced civilization became. Physics didn't care about quantum phases or temporal displacement. Physics simply was, and the humans had learned to make it their weapon. The communication center at Earth Strategic Command buzzed with activity as reports flooded in from across 3 star systems. Director Lim Hyewan stood before a massive holographic display, showing the positions of human fleets throughout the sector, each one engaging Korath forces with the same simple weapon that had seemed so ridiculous just days before. Ma'am, we're getting confirmation from the Kepler system, announced Communications Officer Park Min-soo, his voice filled with disbelief. Captain Cho Young-ji reports successful engagement. 3 Korath destroyers neutralized with minimal ammunition expenditure. Lim. Hewan nodded, but she wasn't surprised. She had been part of the team that developed these weapons, spending sleepless nights running calculations that other species had dismissed as impossible. What about the Vega front? Similar results, Director. Commander Lee Ji-hwan's squadron disabled an entire Korath battle group using only 42 projectiles. The enemy ships are reporting complete system failures across all their advanced technology platforms. Around the command center, Allied observers from a dozen different species watched in stunned silence. The Vrathan military attaché, the same, one who had mocked humanity's weapons in the Galactic Council, stood motionless beside the tactical display. His insectoid features couldn't show emotion the way human faces could, but his body language spoke volumes. I don't understand, he finally said, his mechanical translator making his voice sound hollow. Our combined fleets have been fighting the Korath for 3 years. We've thrown everything at them. Quantum torpedoes, dark matter cannons, Weapons that exist in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Nothing worked. How are simple metal rods succeeding where our most advanced technology failed? Director Lim walked over to a smaller display showing the basic physics equations that governed their weapon system. Because you were trying to beat the Korath at their own game, she explained patiently. You developed more and more complex weapons to match their complexity. We went the opposite direction. She pulled up a hologram showing the fundamental forces of the universe: gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and weak nuclear forces. These haven't changed since the Big Bang. They don't care how advanced your civilization is or what kind of technology you've developed. They just are. The crystalline being from Altair Prime chimed in with harmonic frequencies that translated as confusion. But the Korath can manipulate these forces. They bend space-time itself. They can bend it, yes, Lim agreed. But they can't break it. Every time they phase shift through dimensions, they still have to obey conservation of energy. Every time they jump through time, they still create quantum entanglements with their previous positions. Every time they try to exist in multiple states simultaneously, they still have to maintain mathematical coherence. Captain Nam Ji-woo's voice crackled through the communication system from the front lines. Strategic Command. This is Battle Group 7. We've just engaged a Korath dreadnought that was terrorizing the Proxima colonies. Their reality-warping technology couldn't save them once we calculated the proper trajectory equations. Explain what happened out there, Captain, Lim requested, switching the call to the main speakers so everyone in the command center could hear. It was like Director Lim predicted. Nam's voice carried a note of wonder. The Korath ship tried every trick they had, phasing between dimensions, creating temporal loops, even splitting itself into multiple quantum states. But our targeting computer had already calculated where the ship's core had to be, regardless of what defensive measures they used. The gaseous entity representing the Nebula Collective swirled in patterns that indicated deep thought. You're saying that mathematics itself became your weapon? Exactly, Lim replied. Every Korath ship, no matter how advanced, still has to follow the basic rules of physics. They need energy to power their systems, and that energy has to come from somewhere. They need matter to construct their hulls, and that matter has to exist in space-time. Most importantly, they need mathematical coherence to maintain their existence across multiple dimensions. She brought up footage from the battle at Titan's Edge, showing the moment when the first iron rod struck the Korath flagship's temporal shadow. When our projectile hit their quantum echo, it created a cascade failure in their entire system, not because we overpowered their technology, but because we used the universe's own rules against them. Dr. Kim Sun-hee, the project's lead physicist, joined the explanation from her station. Think of it like this: the Korath built a house of cards using quantum mechanics and dimensional physics. Very impressive, very complex, but ultimately unstable. We didn't try to build a bigger house of cards. We just calculated exactly where to blow a gentle breeze to make the whole thing collapse. Reports continued streaming in from across the battlefield. The tide was turning in humanity's favor, not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through simple mathematical precision. Human ships were systematically dismantling Korath forces by exploiting the fundamental constants that governed all matter and energy in the universe. The most beautiful part, Lim said quietly, is that this approach scales infinitely. The more advanced the enemy technology becomes, the more complex their systems, the more vulnerable they are to basic physics. Complexity creates instability, and instability creates opportunity. The Vrathan attaché processed this information with visible difficulty. His species had spent millennia developing increasingly sophisticated weapons, always trying to match or exceed their enemies' technological capabilities. The idea that simpler could be better went against everything they believed. So you're telling us, he said slowly, that the key to defeating an advanced enemy isn't to become more advanced yourself, but to become more fundamental? Director Lim smiled. Welcome to human warfare. We don't fight technology with technology. We fight it with truth. The universe had rules, and those rules couldn't be negotiated with, bargained with, or overcome through technological advancement. They could only be understood and utilized. Humanity had simply learned to make physics itself into the ultimate weapon. The Korath homeworld hung in space like a dark jewel, surrounded by the largest military force the galaxy had ever seen. Every ship in the Korath Empire had gathered here for what their emperor called the final demonstration, a last stand that would either crush the rebellion or see their civilization destroyed. Admiral Song Tai-hyung watched from the bridge of his flagship as Allied forces prepared for the assault. The combined fleet was impressive by any measure. Thousands of ships from dozens of species, each bringing their most advanced weapons to bear against the enemy. The Vrathan had brought their new quantum disintegrators, weapons that could unmake matter at the subatomic level. The crystalline beings from Altair Prime deployed energy constructs that existed across 17 different dimensions simultaneously. The gaseous entities of the Nebula Collective had somehow weaponized dark matter itself, creating cannons that fired concentrated nothingness. "Sir, the Allied fleet is beginning their attack run," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Bei Jinsu. Through the main view screen, Song could see the battle unfold in spectacular fashion. Beams of pure energy lanced across space, dimensional. Rifts tore holes in reality itself, and weapons that had no names in any human language unleashed forces that bent the laws of physics to their breaking point. For 20 minutes, it looked like it might work. The Korath defense grid flickered under the assault, and several outer stations went dark. But then the real Korath weapons came online. The Emperor's personal dreadnought, a ship the size of a small moon, began to glow with impossible colors. Reality warped around it as temporal weapons aged entire Allied battleships into dust in seconds. Quantum disruptors turned sophisticated alien technology into random particles. Space itself seemed to rebel against the laws of physics as the Korath demonstrated why they had conquered half the galaxy. "Allied casualties are catastrophic," reported Communications Officer Han Minji, her voice tight with shock. "The Vrathan battle group just ceased to exist. The Altair Prime fleet is retreating with 90% losses." Admiral Song nodded grimly. He had expected this. Every military analyst in the galaxy had predicted that the final battle would be a slaughter, with the Korath Empire either falling quickly or proving utterly unstoppable. There seemed to be no middle ground when dealing with technology that could rewrite reality. "Signal all human vessels," he ordered. "Begin approach pattern Alpha 7, prepare to engage." His crew looked at him with expressions ranging from determination to barely concealed terror. They were about to attack an enemy that had just effortlessly destroyed the most advanced military force in galactic history, and they were going to do it with iron rods. Aboard the Emperor's flagship, the Korath leader watched the approaching human fleet with something resembling amusement. His species had evolved beyond the need for individual names or identities. They existed as pure consciousness inhabiting technological bodies. But he remembered the old ways enough to appreciate irony. "The primitives approach," observed his tactical consciousness. "Shall we demonstrate the futility of their gesture?" "Let them come closer," the Emperor replied. "I want to understand what drives a species to such beautiful hopelessness." The human fleet spread out in a formation that made no sense to conventional military thinking. Instead of concentrating their firepower or seeking tactical advantage, they positioned themselves at precise mathematical intervals around the Korath Armada. "Sir, we're receiving targeting solutions from Strategic Command," announced Lieutenant Choi Hwan from the weapons station. "Each ship has been assigned specific coordinates based on quantum field calculations." Admiral Song studied the tactical display. The numbers were beautiful in their simplicity: velocity, mass, trajectory, and time. No exotic physics, no reality bending. Technology, just the fundamental equations that had governed the universe since its birth. "All ships prepare to fire on my mark," he commanded. "Remember, we're not trying to destroy their ships. We're trying to break their mathematics." The Korath Emperor watched with growing interest as electromagnetic signatures spiked across the human fleet. His sensors detected the launch of simple kinetic projectiles, thousands of iron rods accelerating to incredible speeds. "Projectile velocity approaching 99.1% light speed," reported his science consciousness. "Curious. Such precision suggests sophisticated calculation rather than brute force. The first wave of iron rods struck not the Korath, ships themselves, but specific points in the space around them. Each impact created gravitational ripples that interfered with the quantum fields supporting Korath technology. The second wave targeted the mathematical constants that allowed their reality-warping weapons to function. "Emperor, our dimensional anchors are becoming unstable," warned the tactical consciousness with something approaching panic. "The humans are attacking the foundational equations that support our technology matrix." The Emperor finally understood what was happening. While other species had tried to fight the Korath with increasingly complex weapons, the humans had done the opposite. They had stripped warfare down to its most basic elements: mass, velocity, energy, and time. "They're not fighting our technology," he realized. "They're fighting the universe itself and making it fight for them." The third wave of projectiles was the most devastating. Each iron rod had been calculated to exploit a different physical constant: the speed of light, gravitational constant, Planck's constant, the fundamental forces that held reality together. The Korath discovered that no amount of technological advancement could protect them from weapons that used the universe's own operating system. The Emperor's flagship began to buckle as its quantum coherence failed. Systems that had functioned flawlessly for millennia suddenly found themselves operating in a reality where their basic assumptions were under attack. "Impossible," whispered the science consciousness. "They've turned mathematics itself into artillery." As the final iron rod punched through the flagship's collapsing quantum barriers, the Emperor transmitted one last message across all frequencies. His words carried a weight of grudging respect that transcended species barriers. "We sought to transcend the universal laws that govern all existence. They learned to harness those laws and make them weapons. We forgot that the universe doesn't negotiate. It simply is." The massive ship imploded as its reality-warping technology finally collapsed under the weight of its own contradictions. Around it, the rest of the Korath armada followed suit, their advanced systems failing when confronted with weapons that operated according to rules older than civilization. Admiral Song Tae-hyung watched the enemy fleet's destruction with quiet satisfaction. Humanity had won not through superior technology or greater firepower, but by remembering a simple truth that the galaxy had forgotten. The universe had rules, and those rules couldn't be broken, only understood and utilized. Sometimes the most primitive approach was the most unstoppable, because it was built on foundations that couldn't be shaken by any amount of technological sophistication. Humanity had won by making physics itself their ultimate weapon.